The dopamine hit from closing a 10-figure acquisition deal was supposed to last for days. For Liam Parker, it lasted about 10 minutes. They called him the concrete jungle beast on the trading floor, a man who moved with a predator's calm and whose decision-making was as cold and clean as a surgeon's scalpel. He was the top risk management director at one of Wall Street's most bloodthirsty investment funds, and he had just orchestrated a corporate takeover so slick, so brutal, that the champagne being popped in the boardroom felt less like a celebration and more like drinking from the skull of their vanquished enemy. But as his colleagues laughed, their faces flushed with greed and alcohol, Liam felt a strange hum at the base of his skull. It wasn't the stress. He thrived on stress. This was different. It was a low-frequency anxiety, a primal itch telling him that a much larger predator was circling, one that didn't care about stock prices or leveraged buyouts. In the 7 days before the world ended, life was aggressively, annoyingly normal. People complained about the morning commute. They debated the Fed's next move on interest rates. They gossiped. Outside his floor-to-ceiling penthouse window, the city pulsed with ignorant, blissful life. Yet the signs were there, if you knew where to look. Fleeting moments of static on phone calls. News reports, quickly buried, of a few commercial satellites going dark, blamed on an unusually strong solar flare. On the deep web forums he frequented, whispers of a strange, non-reflective asteroid belt entering the solar system were dismissed as conspiracy theories. The most beautiful, and most terrifying, sign was the aurora. Not in Alaska or Norway, but shimmering faintly over the New York skyline, a celestial poison no one understood. The hum in his skull peaked on the 6th day before the end. It wasn't just a hum anymore, it was a migraine that felt like a drill bit boring into his brain. He collapsed onto his expensive leather couch, vision swimming, and when he came to, there was a new icon on his phone. It was a simple, oscillating black hole against a stark white background. The app's name was Omniverse Mart. His first thought was that it was some new, exclusive service for the ultra-wealthy, perhaps pushed to his device by a concierge service he'd forgotten he'd subscribed to. He tapped it open. The interface was minimalist, clean, and terrifyingly intuitive. No sign-up, no login, no request for a credit card. It just knew him. "Welcome, Eternal Platinum customer Liam Parker," the screen flashed. "Okay, a bit presumptuous," he muttered, scrolling through the categories. They were insane. Interstellar delicacies, exoplanet pharmaceuticals, civilization starter kits. This had to be an elaborate prank. A very, very expensive one. Just for the hell of it, he navigated to the food section. His finger hovered over an item that made him chuckle. Grade A9 Kobe beef, raised on a zero-gravity orbital farm, flash-seared by atmospheric re-entry. The price was listed in a currency he'd never seen, contribution points. He had 0, but next to the Buy button was another option, first-time user welcome gift. He tapped it. A confirmation screen appeared. Confirm order? He shrugged. Why not? The instant he hit confirm, something impossible happened. A faint, silvery distortion, like heat haze, shimmered in the air above his marble coffee table. It lasted for less than a second. And then, sitting on a slate plate he didn't own, was a steak. It was seared to perfection, steam rising from its glistening, cross-hatched surface, carrying a scent so rich and savory it made his mouth water instantly. Beside it was a small, self-heating fork. Liam stared. He didn't blink for a full minute. He poked the steak with his finger. It was real. It was hot. He picked up the self-heating fork, which warmed to a perfect temperature in his hand, and took a bite. The flavor exploded in his mouth. It was a symphony of taste and texture so sublime it made every Michelin star meal he'd ever eaten feel like chewing on cardboard. This wasn't a prank. This was real. This was a technology so far beyond human comprehension that it might as well be magic. And Liam Parker, the apex predator of risk management, didn't see a magical steak. He saw the ultimate variable. A world-changing, rule-breaking, paradigm-shattering event was on the horizon, and this app was his exclusive ticket to ride it out. The itch of anxiety in his soul finally had a name. It was the instinct of an animal sensing the coming tsunami. "All right," he said to the empty room, his voice tight with a terrifying mix of fear and exhilaration. "Time to reallocate assets." The next 5 days were a blur of controlled, methodical insanity. Liam liquidated everything. His stock portfolio, his crypto wallets, his offshore accounts, his property holdings. He pulled every string, called in every favor, and converted it all into untraceable, liquid cash. His financial advisors thought he'd gone insane. His partners thought he was having a breakdown. He ignored them. While they were busy worrying about their portfolios, he was on the Omniverse Mart, shopping like a doomsday god. The app didn't take cash. Its currency was contribution points, earned by restoring order to chaotic systems. He had 0 points, but as the eternal platinum customer, he had a line of credit. A massive, seemingly infinite line of credit. Liam's mind, trained to calculate risk and reward, saw this as the single greatest investment opportunity in the history of existence. He rented a massive, climate-controlled warehouse complex in a desolate area upstate under a shell corporation. Then, the shopping began. 50,000 metric tons of military-grade, vacuum-sealed, nitrogen-flushed long-grain rice, he murmured, tapping the order. A flicker of silver light filled the cavernous warehouse, and a mountain of neatly stacked pallets appeared, silent and instant. 10 million liters of purified Swiss Alpine spring water, bottled in self-sanitizing containers. Flicker. Another mountain range of supplies materialize. 100,000 advanced medical kits. Suture kits, broad-spectrum antibiotics from Cygnus X1, bone regeneration foam. Flicker. 50,000 sets of all-weather thermal clothing. Flicker. The crown jewel of his haul was under the Energy tab. 1,000 ORIDECON portable nuclear fission generators. The description promised a clean, stable energy output for 50 years per unit, each the size of a suitcase. He didn't hesitate. Flicker. 1,000 sleek, metallic briefcases appeared, stacked in perfect, gleaming rows. With every delivery, a quantum shuttle, the app's name for its silent, intangible delivery drones, would complete its task. And after every delivery, a prompt would appear. Please rate your delivery experience. Liam, feeling a little giddy, gave every single one a 5-star review. With each review, a small, random bonus would appear in his penthouse. A can of ice-cold Coca-Cola from a reality where it was still made with the original formula. A bar of Belgian chocolate that seemed to hum with contentment. It was a bizarre, delightful little feature that made the impending doom feel slightly more manageable. Looking at his digital manifest, at the sheer, overwhelming volume of supplies stockpiled in his secret lair, he felt a sense of security so profound it was almost euphoric. It was the glee of a dragon sitting atop a hoard of gold that would make Smaug look like a street panhandler. He hadn't abandoned his penthouse yet. He'd simply upgraded it. A new front door, forged from an unidentifiable alloy described as self-repairing adamantite, replaced his old oak one. A compact, silent atmospheric purifier and water reclamation unit was installed in his utility closet. He was preparing for the end of the world in the lap of luxury. The confrontation he knew was coming happened in the final board meeting before he resigned. Director Stevenson, the head of sales and Liam's longtime rival, cornered him by the espresso machine. Stevenson was a man whose ambition vastly outstripped his intellect, a preening peacock in a $1,000 suit. Parker, Stevenson sneered, a smug smirk on his face. I hear you're cashing out. What's the plan? Moving to Vermont to grow organic kale? Or did that last deal finally fry that big brain of yours? The other executives chuckled nervously. They'd all heard the rumors of Liam's bizarre financial behavior. Liam slowly turned from the machine, holding his cup. He activated his awareness field, a new mental skill that had quietly blossomed over the past few days, a side effect, he guessed, of the apps linked to his consciousness. The smog of emotions in the room hit him like a physical force. Stevenson's was the most prominent, a thick, greasy slick of jealousy, schadenfreude, and naked ambition. He could practically taste the man's desire for his position. Liam just looked at him. He didn't say a word. He held Stevenson's gaze, his own eyes as calm and empty as a winter sky. In that moment, he saw Stevenson not as a rival, but as a ghost. A walking corpse, blissfully unaware that his expensive watch, his tailored suit, and his smug sense of self-importance were about to have a market value of absolute zero. Why waste breath on a dead man? He turned and walked out of the room, leaving Stevenson sputtering in a wake of cold, silent contempt. From his penthouse that evening, he watched the world go on. Stevenson was probably at a bar somewhere, already plotting how to carve up Liam's former territory. Elsewhere in the city, a sharp-eyed young woman named Ava, a tactical police unit captain, was leading her team through a grueling hostage rescue simulation, honing skills that would soon be tested in ways she couldn't imagine. At a national observatory 1,000 miles away, an elderly astronomer stared at his screen in cold horror. watching as the asteroid belt broke formation and adjusted its trajectory. Each rock now aimed at a major population center like a volley of cosmic artillery. His frantic report to his superiors was flagged as anxiety-induced data misinterpretation, and quietly filed away. Liam wasn't watching the news. He was in his kitchen, enjoying the last of his zero-gravity Kobe steak. The world was holding its breath, and he was the only one who could hear the exhale coming. He savored the last bite, a feeling of absolute, unshakable calm settling over him. He was ready. Then, it began. The massive television screen on his wall dissolved into a blizzard of static. The lights in his penthouse flickered once, twice, then died, plunging the room into darkness, save for the emergency glow of his Oricon generator kicking in silently in the closet. He walked to the window. Outside, the city's brilliant tapestry of light was winking out, block by block, like a dying star. And high above, the sky was on fire. Not the gentle, ethereal glow of the strange aurora, but thousands upon thousands of searing, incandescent trails of fire, streaking down from the heavens. It was beautiful. It was final. The end of the world had arrived, right on schedule. 3 days. That's how long it took for the symphony of civilization to degrade into a death rattle. You see, the first 3 days were pure, unadulterated chaos. The kind you see in movies but can never truly grasp. The non-stop screaming eventually blended into the background noise, like traffic on a busy Monday. The distant pops of gunfire and the crump of exploding gas stations were the new rhythm of the city. From his soundproofed penthouse, Liam Parker had a front row seat. His building's power grid had failed on day one, plunging everyone else into a terrifying darkness. The emergency alarms shrieked for about an hour before their batteries died, and then, silence. An unnatural, heavy silence that was far more terrifying than the noise it replaced. It was the sound of a world holding its breath before the final plunge. Liam, however, was having none of that. While the rest of the high-rise cowered in the dark, his apartment was a beacon of defiant light, powered by a suitcase-sized Oricon nuclear generator humming away silently in his utility closet. He sat on his leather couch, a glass of 25-year-old Macallan in hand, watching the end of the world on a 12-screen security feed. High-definition misery. Then the rain started. It wasn't normal rain. It glowed, a faint, sickening, greenish-yellow luminescence that painted the benighted city in the color of decay. Liam watched on his cameras as the rain touched the twisted metal of a wrecked bus down on the street. It began to sizzle, white foam bubbling up from the steel as if it were being doused in pure acid. He saw a figure, a man, stumble out from an alleyway, face turned to the sky in a desperate plea. The instant the glowing drops touched his skin, he screamed. It was a wet, gurgling scream that was cut short as he collapsed, his body looking like it was being dissolved from the inside out. Photonic acid rain, the Omniverse Mart had called it. A Stage 1 calamity. As Liam watched this horror show, a white-hot spike of pain lanced through his skull, so intense it made him drop his glass. It shattered on the floor, the sound unnaturally loud in the quiet room. He gritted his teeth, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the armrests of his couch. It felt like his brain was being rewired by a clumsy amateur with a soldering iron. And when the pain receded, the world had changed. It wasn't a visual change. It was a new layer of sensory input, a new channel that had just been forced open in his mind. He focused on the apartment below his, where the Sterling family was huddled. He could feel their terror, a cold, clammy blanket of it. He could taste the bitter despair of the old couple across the hall, who knew they were trapped and would die here. And from the streets below, he felt something else. A crude, one-dimensional, all-consuming hunger. It was the collective consciousness, if you could call it that, of the shambling figures now aimlessly wandering the concrete canyons. The newly minted low-tier zombies. His awareness field was online. Range, he estimated, about 15 feet. A small bubble of pure, unfiltered truth. It was exhilarating. He spent the next hour just playing with it. He'd extend his focus, feeling the frantic, scurrying rat-like fear of a man barricading his door on the floor below, then shift to the zombie bumping uselessly against the building's main entrance, its entire being a single note of, eat. He was a god-king listening to the prayers of the desperate and the damned. It was during this little practice session that the call came through. Not on his phone, the networks were deader than a doornail, but on a small, sleek satellite communicator he'd bought from the app for just such an occasion. The caller ID was a name that made him sigh. Jessica. Jessica was a junior analyst from another department, The kind of woman who weaponized her good looks and a feigned helplessness to get ahead. She'd once, accidentally, deleted a crucial file and cried in his office until he, against his better judgment, stayed up all night to recover it for her. He later learned she'd used that free time to schmooze a senior partner who got her a hefty bonus. Classic Jessica. He let it ring a few times before answering, his voice a mask of calm concern. "Jessica, is that you? Are you okay?" Sobs immediately erupted from the speaker. It was a masterful performance. "Liam, oh my God, thank God you're alive. I've been so worried." Liam leaned back, swirling the imaginary whiskey in his hand. Using his awareness field, he focused on the emotional signal coming through the satellite link. It was faint, but it was there. And it was disgusting. On the surface was a layer of practiced, tearful panic. But beneath it, pulsing like a raw sewage pipe, was a thick, greedy core of selfish entitlement and a desperate, calculating hope. She wasn't worried about him, she was just running a list of potential suckers and he'd been the first to pick up. "It's a nightmare, Liam," she wailed. "We're trapped in my father's villa out in the Hamptons. The security staff all ran off, the food is almost gone. We saw what the rain did. Please, Liam, you were always so resourceful, so smart. You have to have a plan. You have to come get us. I knew I could count on you." She was picturing it in her head, he could feel it. Him, the knight in shining armor, showing up with a truck full of food and water. Her father, the wealthy industrialist, would immediately take charge, of course, and Liam would be the loyal, hard-working provider. He could practically feel her imagining herself graciously allowing him to serve them. The sheer audacity was almost funny. Liam let a perfect beat of silence hang in the air. "Of course," he said, his voice dripping with faux sincerity. "I'm on my way. Your father's place, that's the one on Meadow Lane, right? With the big fountain out front?" Yes, that's it." The relief and triumph in her voice were nauseating. She'd hooked a big one. "Good," Liam said, his tone turning as cold as the void between stars. "You just stay right there. Don't move, don't try to go anywhere. Just wait for me." He hung up. He pictured her, jumping for joy, telling her useless father that their savior was coming. He pictured them rationing their last can of gourmet olives, their mouths watering in anticipation. He pictured the hope turning to confusion as the hours dragged on. Then the confusion turning to anger. And the anger, finally, curdling into that same cold, clammy despair he could feel from his neighbors. Leaving her to marinate in a stew of false hope and inevitable doom was a cruelty so much more refined than a simple, no. It was a lesson in resource allocation. Some assets, he murmured to the empty room, are just not worth acquiring. With that bit of housekeeping done, it was time for an upgrade. Surviving was easy. Thriving was the goal. He opened the Omniverse Mart. Under the Reconnaissance tab, he found exactly what he needed. Hummingbird-class stealth drones, pack of 6. Nearly silent, cloaked from visual and basic electronic detection. Feeds directly to a neural interface hub. Enhanced thermal and biosign detection. The cost and contribution points was negligible against his credit line. He also added a tactical environment analysis hub to the cart. It was a sleek black server that would collate all the drone data, flagging threats, mapping safe routes, and analyzing atmospheric changes in real time. Confirm purchase. A silver shimmer bloomed in the center of his living room. A second later, a Pelican-style case containing 6 drones the size of his thumb and a server rack no bigger than a shoebox sat on his rug. After giving the Quantum Shuttle another 5-star rating and receiving a complimentary, ice-cold bottle of Japanese melon soda, he got to work. Within 30 minutes, his kingdom had eyes. On the massive TV, the 12-screen security feed was replaced by 6 drone perspectives and the main analysis hub. He sent them out, 1 to patrol the building, 4 to cover the immediate blocks, and 1 to fly high, giving him a bird's-eye view. The city was even worse than he thought. He watched through Drone 3's feed as a small group of survivors tried to pry open the back door of a minimart. His analysis hub immediately flagged the building's interior. Red. Biosigns. 27. Hostile. Non-human. A flick of the thumb on his control pad activated the drone's enhanced thermal. The store was packed with glowing red shapes, all packed near the doors, drawn by the noise. The survivors were trying to break into a can of zombie sardines. Then he saw something new. A lone zombie, slower than the others, managed to grab one of the survivors. It bit down hard on the man's arm. The man screamed, his friends managed to beat the zombie off him, and they dragged him away. Liam kept Drone 4 on them. They found a sheltered alley, and the bitten man slumped against the wall. He started to convulse. His skin turned a mottled gray, his veins blackened. The whole process took less than a minute. When he stood up, his eyes were milky white, and he moved with a speed and aggression that the original zombies lacked. He was a new model, factory fresh and hungry. The hub updated its threat assessment. Pathogen vector transformation confirmed. Threat level increased. His gaze shifted to another drone feed, the one he'd assigned to patrol the building. He zoomed in on the penthouse 2 floors below his. Mr. Sterling, the arrogant CEO who used to sneer at him in the elevator, was pacing frantically. On his marble kitchen island was a single bag of chips and a half-empty bottle of water. Sterling's wife was crying in the corner. Every few seconds, Sterling would stop his pacing and stare upwards, directly at Liam's floor. There was no light coming from Liam's windows, no sound. But Sterling knew. He knew Liam was the type to be prepared. The desperate, greedy look in the man's eyes was an emotion Liam knew all too well. It was the look of a predator sizing up its prey. Liam smiled. Let him look. Let him wonder. He switched his attention back to the minimart. The survivors had finally pried the door open. Inside, the nest of zombies stirred. From the ceiling, a single, severed wire dangled near the doorframe, connected to the store's old security alarm. One of the survivors, in his clumsy haste to get inside, was about to brush right against it. Liam leaned forward, taking a slow sip of his melon soda. The show was about to start. You see, by day 5, the world had officially started to stink. It wasn't just the ever-present coppery tang of blood anymore. No, this was a more complex bouquet. It was the smell of rot, of burst pipes leaking sewage into the streets, and the sharp, chemical reek of the photonic acid rain evaporating from superheated puddles. It was the smell of a society that had forgotten how to use a toilet. From his penthouse, a hermetically sealed bubble of civilization, Liam Parker could see the slow-motion breakdown. The desperate were getting bolder. He'd watched on his drone feeds as a screaming match over a can of beans ended with a tire iron to the head. This, he thought with a detached sense of academic curiosity, was natural selection in real time. The weak, the stupid, the unprepared, they were being efficiently pruned from the human tree. While others were starting to feel the gnawing pains of dehydration and dysentery, Liam was busy with more pressing matters. He was getting the hang of his new superpower. The awareness field was less like a sixth sense and more like an emotional Wi-Fi network. He could feel the raw, unfiltered data of the souls around him. Fear was a cold, prickly static. Greed was a hot, oily slick. Despair was a heavy, suffocating blanket. It was like having the world's most advanced lie detector hardwired into his brain. To test its more active applications, he focused his field on a half-starved rat skittering down the hallway outside his apartment. He didn't wish it harm, not really. He just pushed a single concept into its tiny, frantic mind: predator. The rat, which had been sniffing for crumbs, suddenly froze. Its fur bristled, it let out a terrified squeak and, in a blind panic, slammed head first into the opposing wall with a sickening little thump. It lay there, stunned and twitching. Well, note to self, Liam muttered to his empty living room, perception warp works. Maybe a little too well on small mammals. His gaze drifted to Drone 2's feed, which was still passively observing the penthouse 2 floors down. Mr. Sterling, the pompous CEO who treated the elevator like his personal throne room, was not having a good day. He was gaunt, his expensive suit rumpled and stained. He and the 2 former security guards he'd hired as personal muscle were huddled together, their collective emotional signature a pungent mix of hunger and festering resentment. Their eyes kept darting upwards, towards his floor. They just knew he was prepared. The greed he felt rolling off them was so thick he could almost taste it. Liam decided it was dinner time. Surviving was one thing, rubbing it in was the spice of life. He navigated the Omniverse Mart, bypassing the survival tabs and going straight to Gourmet Delights. He selected a Volcano King Tom Yum Hot Pot, Premium Seafood Edition. The scent was a weapon. It began as a subtle tease, leaking through the high-tech ventilation system he'd had installed. First, the sharp, clean perfume of lemongrass and galangal. Then, the zesty punch of lime, followed by the rich, savory aroma of a simmering prawn and chili broth. Within minutes, a fragrant cloud of culinary superiority enveloped the entire top floor. Downstairs, Liam watched on his drone feed as Sterling's head snapped up. The man sniffed the air like a bloodhound. His eyes, already wide with hunger, bulged. The two guards began to fidget, their stomachs audibly growling. The pure, unadulterated smell of hot, delicious food in a world of canned dog food and stale crackers was a form of psychological warfare. "Okay, you idiots," Sterling's voice was a harsh, desperate whisper, barely picked up by the drone's microphone. "That bastard Parker, he's up there, living like a king. We've been starving for 2 days, and he's cooking that. It's time we redistribute some wealth." Liam almost laughed. The man was a walking, talking cliché. He watched as the three of them, armed with a fire axe and a crowbar, began their clumsy ascent up the emergency stairs. He felt their intent through his awareness field. A clumsy, brutal plan to break down his door and take everything. It was sloppy, predictable, and frankly, a little insulting. He didn't even bother to stand up. He just forked a perfectly cooked squid ring from the bubbling pot and dipped it in the accompanying chili sauce. Crack! The sound of splintering wood echoed from his front door. Then a heavy thud, and another. They were surprisingly persistent. Crash! The cheap, standard-issue apartment door, never meant for this kind of abuse, flew inwards, ripped from its hinges. Sterling stood there, face flushed, chest heaving, the fire axe held like a trophy. His two goons fanned out behind him, crowbar and a heavy pipe at the ready. "All right, Parker," Sterling bellowed, his voice cracking with a mix of triumph and desperation. "Party's over. Hand over every last scrap of food and water you have right now." Then their eyes adjusted to the light, and they saw him. The scene before them broke their brains. Liam was sitting on a plush leather sofa, legs crossed, calmly chewing his mouthful of squid. In front of him, the hot pot bubbled merrily on a portable induction cooktop, steam rising in fragrant clouds. The entire apartment was lit, warm and comfortable. A massive TV played a high-definition nature documentary, penguins, of all things, from a hard drive. To the side, the small nuclear generator hummed with a sound softer than a whisper. The air smelled not of fear and decay, but of lemongrass and chili. The disconnect was so total, so absolute, that the three men just stood there, minds short-circuiting. Liam swallowed, wiped his mouth delicately with a napkin, and looked up. His eyes, normally just sharp, were now abysses of cold, calm power. "You know," he said, his voice level, "I was just thinking the trash needed to be taken out." And then he activated his awareness field, turning the full force of the perception warp on the three of them. It wasn't a gentle push like with the rat. It was a psychic sledgehammer. For Sterling, the world dissolved into a nightmare. The fragrant steam from the hot pot suddenly smelled like rotting corpses. The sleek, modern apartment twisted into a slaughterhouse, walls dripping with blood. He could feel the phantom sensation of 100 slimy, grabbing hands clawing at his back, an entire horde of zombies right behind him, their breath cold on his neck. For the two guards, it was simpler, more primal. They suddenly felt an overwhelming, soul-crushing terror, the kind a mouse feels when it sees the shadow of a hawk. Their lizard brains screamed a single, deafening command: "Flee!" Sterling shrieked, a high-pitched, unmanly sound of pure animal terror. He dropped the axe, spun around, and bolted, blind with panic. He crashed directly into his own men, who were also trying to flee. The three of them became a tangled mess of flailing limbs. They stumbled, tripped over each other, and tumbled head over heels out of the ruined doorway and into the dark stairwell. Their momentum carried them down the first flight of stairs in a chaotic, bone-jarring cascade of bodies. They landed in a heap at the bottom, dazed and groaning. And that's when the real zombies, drawn by the loud crash of the door and Sterling's scream, emerged from the lower floors. Their low, guttural moans filled the enclosed space. Liam watched via his drone, which had been hovering discreetly in the hallway ceiling. He took another slow, deliberate bite of a mussel as the wet, tearing sounds began, punctuated by the dying, gurgling screams of the three idiots. "Noisy," he commented to the penguins on his TV. He pulled out his sleek satellite communicator, which was also the interface for the Omniverse Mart. He navigated to Home and Fortress, then Doors and Entryways. He scrolled past the reinforced steel and honeycomb polymer options. Ah, there it was. Class B titanium alloy automated door. Self-installing via quantum nanite assembly. Ballistic and kinetic impact rating, excellent. He tapped Confirm Purchase. Across the hall, in Sterling's apartment, his wife and teenage son had heard everything. The crash, their husband and father's triumphant shout, followed by that ungodly scream, and then, silence. a thick, dreadful silence now being filled by the feasting sounds from the stairwell. They huddled together in the dark, trembling. The hunger in their bellies was now overshadowed by a new, all-consuming emotion. Absolute terror of the man across the hall. 10 minutes later, a silver shimmer appeared in Liam's ruined doorway. A cloud of microscopic, glittering nanites swarmed into place, disassembling the broken frame and door fragments into dust before weaving a new one from thin air. Within seconds, a new door, seamless and forged from what looked like a solid block of dark, polished metal, clicked shut with the satisfying finality of a bank vault. Liam gave the quantum nanite assembly a 5-star rating. A small, frosted can of premium root beer materialized on his coffee table with a soft pop. A gift for his patronage. He leaned back, sipping his new drink. The immediate threat was gone. His fortress was stronger, but the world outside was getting weirder. All over the globe, fractured governments and isolated military bases were beginning to broadcast desperate, repeating messages. They were establishing safe zones, calling for survivors with skills to rally to them. But Liam's awareness field taught him to trust actions, not words. Were they beacons of hope, or larger, more organized traps for the desperate? Far across the city, in a locked-down office building, Ava, a former SWAT captain, checked her last clip of ammunition. Her team was down to 3 members, and the food would be gone by morning. The real threat, however, wasn't the zombies scratching at the doors. It was her second-in-command, a brutish man named Marcus, whose gaze had started to linger on her and the other female survivor with a hungry look that had nothing to do with food. She could feel the tension in the air, a different kind of violence waiting to erupt. Just as Liam was about to have his drones resume their patrol patterns, a new notification pinged silently on his Omniverse Mart interface. The text glowed with a faint, golden light. Acquisition opportunity detected. Item eligible for point conversion. Item: Mutated Energy Core, Tier 1. Scanning for nearby sources. A map of his building appeared on the screen. Most of the floors were blank. But on the floor directly below the Sterling's now empty apartment, a single, pulsating red dot appeared. It was moving. One of the zombies attracted by the commotion wasn't like the others. It was evolving. Liam smiled. The hunt was on. By day 7, the world had learned a new lesson: silence. The initial symphony of car alarms, gunshots, and screams had faded, replaced by a thick, oppressive quiet. It was the kind of silence that made the sound of your own heartbeat feel like a drum solo in a library. Survival, it turned out, was a stealth mission. Hunger was still the primary antagonist, but now it had a co-star, a gnawing, ever-present dread. Some small, pathetic groups had started to form, huddled together in the dark, but trust was a currency more valuable and far scarcer than a can of beans. For Liam Parker, however, the silence wasn't a threat, it was an invitation. It was time to go outside. Not because he was running low on supplies, his pantry could outlast a biblical flood, but because his little high-rise kingdom was getting boring, and the Omniverse Mart had just given him a new video game to play. The city had decided to cosplay as a silent horror movie, complete with a new special effect. A thick, clammy fog had rolled in overnight, blanketing everything in a gray shroud. This wasn't your average morning mist. It carried the faint, metallic tang of the strange element dust, and it clung to surfaces with an oily persistence. Visibility was down to maybe 15 feet, turning familiar streets into an alien labyrinth. For anyone else, this was a death sentence. For Liam, it was the perfect hunting ground. His awareness field, which he'd been practicing with by mentally tormenting pigeons on his balcony, had leveled up slightly. He could now feel the cold, empty static of zombies within a 10-meter radius, a perfect bubble of supernatural radar. He wasn't going out in his silk pajamas, of course. A quick shopping spree on the mart, paid for with a few instant noodles and a case of bottled water he'd had lying around from his pre-apocalypse life, yielded his new look. No bulky, scavenged riot gear for him. He donned a low-grade personal combat suit, a sleek, black affair made of a matte-finish nano-weave that felt like a second skin. It wouldn't stop a freight train, but it was rated for bites, scratches, and low-caliber rounds. Tucked into a sheath on his thigh was a razor-sharp alloy dagger that hummed with a faint energy. And in his hand, the centerpiece. A silenced pistol that didn't fire bullets, but tiny, hyper-velocity kinetic slugs. It was quiet, efficient, and devastatingly elegant. He looked less like a survivor and more like a character from a sci-fi blockbuster who'd taken a wrong turn. The new titanium alloy door slid open with a whisper, and Liam stepped into the shrouded hallway. The fog was even thicker here, muffling all sound. He activated his awareness field, and the world transformed. The physical world was a gray blur, but his mind now saw a 3D map of emotions and life signs. He could sense the lingering terror of the now-deceased Sterling family in their apartment, a faint, schmaltzy stain on the psychic air. Further down, he sensed the blank, hungry voids that were the zombies. They were cold spots, blips on a radar only he could see. He moved down the emergency stairwell, the one where Sterling and his goons had met their messy end. Their half-eaten remains were still there, a grotesque welcome mat to the new world. Liam stepped over them without a change in expression. He was a risk management expert, after all. And these guys? They were a calculated risk that had failed to pay out. Outside, the city was a ghost town. Cars sat abandoned, some with their doors still hanging open. The only movement was the slow, lazy drift of the fog. Liam began to walk, his footsteps making no sound on the pavement. His awareness field flickered, warning him of a cluster of 5 cold spots to his left, shambling aimlessly in an alleyway. He simply adjusted his course, skirting around them. He wasn't here for random XP grinding. He had a specific target. The app had marked a special one, a pulsating red dot on his internal map, just a few blocks away. As he walked, he spotted them. Another group of survivors. 3 men and a woman, all dressed in ragged clothes, clutching makeshift weapons. A baseball bat wrapped in barbed wire, a kitchen knife, a rusty pipe. They were moving with the frantic, jerky caution of terrified rabbits. Liam watched from the cover of a bus stop as one of them, the clear leader, picked up an empty soda can and tossed it down a side street. A few seconds later, the groans of a dozen zombies could be heard as they were drawn to the sound. The group used the diversion to scuttle across the main road, their faces pale with terror. Liam almost chuckled. It was so primitive. So inefficient. They were playing zombie survival horror on nightmare difficulty. He was playing a city builder with cheat codes enabled. He felt a flicker of something from them through his field, not just fear, but a nasty, desperate greed as their eyes fell on a deserted pharmacy. They were risking their lives for a bottle of aspirin and maybe some expired candy bars. He shook his head and moved on. They were irrelevant. His own personal red dot was close now. He felt it before he saw it. A presence that was different from the others. The normal zombies were cold, empty static. This one had a thrum to it. A low, pulsating energy, like a badly wired appliance. He rounded the corner of a bank and saw it. The app had called it a Tier 1 mutated. In person, it looked like a standard zombie had decided to get into competitive eating and then exploded. It was a pustule wanderer. Its body was grotesquely bloated, covered in pulsating, glowing green sacs that leaked a foul-smelling ooze. It was twice the size of a normal zombie and moved with a clumsy, shuffling gait, its swollen limbs dragging on the ground. Any other survivor would have run, or maybe thrown a grenade, attracting every corpse in a 5-block radius. Liam just stood there, completely calm, and raised his pistol. The pustule wanderer hadn't noticed him. Its senses were clearly dulled by its mutation. Peefed, peefed, peefed. 3 virtually silent puffs were all it took. The kinetic slugs were invisible to the naked eye, but their impact was not. 3 neat, dark holes appeared on the creature's forehead in a tight grouping. The pulsating in its sacs stopped. The huge, bloated thing just stood there for a second, as if contemplating this new development, before collapsing forward with a wet, heavy splat that sent a wave of green goo across the pavement. Liam waited a moment, ensuring it was truly dead, before walking over. The stench was incredible, a mix of rot and bizarre chemicals, but he ignored it. Following the app's instructions, he used his dagger to slice open the largest pustule on the creature's back. Inside, nestled amongst the gore, was a thumb-sized crystal. It was a dull, gray color, but it pulsed with a faint internal light. He picked it up with a handkerchief. A message instantly appeared on the invisible interface in his mind. Corrupted zombie core, Tier F1 acquired. Convert to order contribution points? Yes, he whispered, a small, satisfied smile touching his lips. Conversion successful, plus 10 order contribution points. The number 10, clean and golden, appeared in the corner of his vision. He had done it. He hadn't just killed a monster, he had confirmed the fundamental economic principle of this new world. He had found the currency. The satisfaction wasn't the visceral thrill of the kill, but the cold, clean pleasure of understanding the system. of holding the key. He didn't need to stay out here in this stinking fog. But now, it was a game. With 10 points in his digital pocket, he felt like a kid at an arcade with a fresh roll of quarters. He navigated the Omniverse Mart menu in his mind. He could buy a hot meal, a new set of clothes, or an upgrade. He found it under Personal Enhancements. Tactical Contact Lenses, Model T1. Provides thermal, night vision, and basic HUD integration. Cost: 10 order contribution points. Purchase. He felt a faint tingling in his eyes. He blinked, and the world snapped into a new level of focus. A faint, translucent green overlay now framed his vision. In the top left, his point balance, 10. No, wait, 0. In the top right, a minimap generated by his awareness field. He toggled the vision modes with a mental command. The gray fog dissolved into a world of heat signatures. The cold bodies of the zombies were now clear, dark blue shapes against the slightly warmer background radiation of the city. He could see them through walls. This was a game changer. He spent the next hour strolling through the fog-shrouded streets like a god taking a walk through his garden. His tactical lenses and awareness field worked in perfect synergy. He saw them, felt them, and dispatched them with his silenced pistol long before they knew he was there. Each kill was a clean, emotionless transaction. F5ed, Corrupted Zombie Core, Tier F, X1 acquired. Plus 5 points. This one was smaller. F5ed, Corrupted Zombie Core, Tier F, X1 acquired. Plus 8 points. A slightly tougher one. The points racked up. 13, 22, 30, 41. He was getting the hang of it, identifying the ones that looked healthier, and were therefore worth more points. As his hunt continued, his thoughts drifted to the bigger picture. The Omniverse Mart was a product of some insane, high-level civilization. The dust, the zombies, was this all connected? Far away, in the planet's frozen north, the great ice sheets of the Arctic, now contaminated with the strange element dust, were not just melting. They were sublimating. Gigatons of ancient ice were vanishing, not into the sea, but seemingly into thin air, sea-lying open microscopic rifts in spacetime and releasing plumes of prehistoric methane into the atmosphere. The world wasn't just ending, it was being terraformed into something new and terrible. And elsewhere, others were fighting their own, more desperate battles. Deep beneath the city in a state-of-the-art subterranean biolab, Dr. Haley Vance watched the last backup generator splutter. Red emergency lights bathed her face in a hellish glow. The containment fields holding her most volatile samples were failing. Soon, the entire facility would become her tomb. Clutched in her hand was a lead-lined vial containing her life's work, and perhaps the world's doom. A sample of pure, unadulterated strange element dust. Liam had just taken down a particularly ugly zombie that had gotten tangled in a bus stop ad, bringing his total to a neat 50 points. He was about to call it a day and head back for a well-deserved steak dinner when a new notification flashed across his HUD. It wasn't the calm, blue text of a point acquisition. This one was bright, flashing gold, accompanied by a sense of urgency he could feel from the app itself. Opening square bracket ! Flash sale incoming. Item. F-class gene reinforcement serum. Strengthens cellular structure, enhances stamina, and increases metabolic efficiency by 300%. A foundational step toward superhuman evolution. Standard price. 500 order contribution points. Flash sale price. 50 order contribution points. Time remaining. 0:59. Liam's heart, for the first time since the world ended, actually skipped a beat. A 90% discount. It was a test. A reward for the proactive. A prize for the one man on Earth playing the game correctly. The timer ticked down. 58, 57. He didn't even need 1 second. His mind screamed the command. Buy it. The syringe, once purchased, didn't appear in his hand. Instead, a tiny, almost invisible quantum throw drone materialized for a fraction of a second, pressing a cold, needle-fine point against his neck. Liam felt a shocking, electric jolt, not painful, but utterly overwhelming. It was like being struck by lightning and finding out you were the battery it was trying to charge. Every cell in his body screamed, first in protest, then in a chorus of pure, unadulterated power. His heart hammered against his ribs like a drum solo played by a speed metal god. He could feel his very bones humming, his muscles coiling and uncoiling as they flooded with energy. The dull ache in his lower back from too many years in an office chair vanished. The slight strain in his eyes from a lifetime of screen gazing was gone. He felt clean, new, like a factory reset human. He flexed his hand, and the simple motion felt profoundly different. Faster, stronger. He took a deep breath, and his lungs seemed to expand twice as far, pulling in the stale, apocalyptic air and filtering it into pure fuel. A grin, wide and a little bit unhinged, spread across his face. 50 points for this? This was the deal of the century. The Omniverse Mart wasn't just a store, it was a path to godhood, and it had a fantastic rewards program. A fresh notification pinged on his tactical lens HUD. Gene reinforcement complete. Physical attributes moderately enhanced. Mental fortitude bonus applied. Awareness field has stabilized and expanded. New awareness field radius, 15 meters. 15 meters. His personal bubble of bullshit detection and psychic radar had just tripled in size. He could practically feel the entire floor of his high-rise now, the cold static of the few remaining zombies trapped in other apartments, the faint, lingering psychic stains of despair and fear. It was glorious. He spent the next week in a state of hyper-productive bliss. The world outside his window continued its scheduled decline into chaos. The acid rain returned, and this time, it felt angry. It wasn't just a light sizzle anymore, it was a downpour of chemical fury. The rain was a sickly, translucent yellow, and it didn't just sting, it chewed. Concrete facades began to weep gravel, and steel rebar, exposed to the elements, hissed and dissolved like sugar in hot coffee. The great bridges that stitched the city together groaned under the assault, their mighty steel cables fraying strand by strand. The city was being cut off from itself, island by island. For the pathetic little bands of survivors, this was a new nightmare. They learned to fear the rain a lot more than the zombies, scurrying for cover like roaches when the sky turned yellow. Liam, however, saw it as a market opportunity. The increased danger meant fewer people were out scavenging. Fewer people scavenging meant more delicious, point-filled mutated zombies were just wandering around, waiting to be harvested. He became a wraith in the acid-drenched streets. Dressed in a new, slightly better combat suit, this one rated for moderate chemical corrosion, he moved through the downpour like a ghost. His enhanced body was a marvel. He could sprint for 10 minutes without feeling winded. He could leap over obstacles that would have stopped a normal person cold. His reflexes were insane. On one occasion, a zombie lunged from a blind corner, and he had already put a kinetic slug through its head before his brain even consciously registered the threat. The points rolled in. 50 became 100. 100 became 200. He specifically targeted the bigger, nastier mutations, the ones whose corrupted cores glowed a little brighter and were worth double-digit points. By day 14, he was sitting on a cool 300 order contribution points, a small fortune in the New World's economy. And he was getting bored again. The F-class zombies were becoming trivial, like swatting flies. It was time to expand his hunting grounds. He was heading towards the downtown commercial district, a place most people would consider a death sentence, when he saw it. A news helicopter, long since abandoned, sat precariously on the edge of a skyscraper's roof. As Liam watched, the acid rain finally ate through a critical support strut. The entire tail section of the helicopter tore away and tumbled down 30 stories, crashing onto the deck of the Grand River Bridge with a sickening crunch. The impact, combined with a week of chemical erosion, was the last straw. With a groan that sounded like a dying god, a massive section of the bridge gave way. Just at that moment, a military convoy, 4 armored trucks and a jeep, was attempting the crossing. They were a vision of the old world's power, bristling with guns and grim-faced soldiers. But the new world didn't care about guns. The lead truck plunged nose first into the gap, pulling the others with it in a horrifying chain reaction of tearing steel and screaming men. They didn't fall into water. They fell into the river below, now a churning, fuming cauldron of industrial runoff and concentrated acid. The screams were cut off with sickening finality. Liam watched the whole thing through his tactical lenses from a quarter-mile away, completely unmoved. He just took a slow sip from a can of ice-cold coconut water he'd bought for 1 point. Well, he muttered to the empty street, so much for the cavalry. It was a valuable lesson for any onlookers. In this new world, brute force and organization meant nothing without the right cheat codes. He was about to continue on his way when his HUD lit up again, this time with something new. His lenses, synced with his awareness field, highlighted a single, bright orange heat signature moving at incredible speed. It was weaving through alleys, vaulting over cars, a blur of desperate motion. Behind it, a cluster of 4 other heat signatures, moving with disciplined, tactical slowness. And behind them, a chaser of about 30 dark blue cold spots, a horde of zombies drawn by the commotion. Now what do we have here? Liam mused, finding a comfortable perch on a 3rd-story fire escape, hidden from view. He zoomed in with his lenses. The lead figure was a woman. Even in the rain and chaos, he could see she was a pro. She wore scavenged tactical gear, torn and battered, and moved with an economy of motion that spoke of years of training. In her hand, she clutched a combat knife, which she used to gut a zombie that got too close without breaking stride. But she was hurt. A dark stain was spreading across her left thigh, and her movements, while fast, were becoming ragged. The 4 figures behind her weren't zombies. They were men, her former teammates, he deduced. They weren't chasing her to help. They were hurting her, using her as bait. Every time she cleared a path, they would follow at a safe distance. They had intentionally led the horde to her. Within his awareness field, Liam felt a maelstrom of emotions from the woman. Pain, exhaustion, but overriding it all was a core of pure, incandescent rage. A rage so potent it felt like a hot poker in his mind. It was directed squarely at the 4 men behind her. Ah, Liam thought, a slow smile spreading across his lips. A classic betrayal, an alpha wolf, stabbed in the back by her own pack. How delightfully cliché. He watched, fascinated, as she was finally cornered in a small plaza. The zombies shambled in, blocking the only exit. She slumped against a fountain, panting, her leg now clearly failing her. She was a cornered animal, ready to go down fighting. The 4 men had stopped a block away, watching, waiting for the zombies to finish their work so they could slip away clean. Liam felt a flicker of something. Not pity, not empathy, it was the detached appreciation of a collector seeing a rare, valuable piece. This woman, this, Maya, as her ID tag read when he zoomed in, was an asset. A high-quality tool, strong, skilled, and now filled with a righteous hatred that could be focused. Letting her die here would be a waste of a perfectly good resource. But charging in to save her? Please, that was for comic book heroes and idiots. Liam Parker was a businessman. He pulled up the Omniverse Mart interface in his mind. He didn't need a weapon. He needed a tool. He scrolled past the grenades and the assault rifles to the Support and Diversion tab. High-frequency sonic lure, single use. Emits a 180 decibel multi-spectrum pulse that is irresistible to F-class and most E-class undead. Effective range, 100 meters. Duration, 15 seconds. Cost, 20 order contribution points. Cheap, elegant, efficient. Purchase, he commanded. A small, metallic disc, no bigger than a coin, materialized in his gloved hand. He didn't even stand up. With a casual flick of his wrist, he tossed it high and far, sending it sailing over the plaza to land in the middle of a street running perpendicular to the scene. For a second, nothing happened. Then, the lure activated. It didn't make a sound to human ears, but to the zombies, it was a dinner bell from heaven. The entire horde, which had been closing in on Maya for the kill, stopped dead. Their heads all snapped in the direction of the lure as one. A moment of collective, gormless confusion, and then they turned and shambled, then broke into a clumsy run, towards the invisible sound. The 30-strong horde bypassed the plaza completely, a tide of rotting flesh diverted by a 20-point investment. Down in the plaza, Maya stared, her face a mask of disbelief. The wall of death that had been about to swallow her had just walked away. The window of opportunity was tiny, but for a professional like her, it was a football field. She grit her teeth, shoved herself off the fountain, and limped into the dark mouth of an alley, vanishing from sight. Liam's HUD flashed. Points. 280. Best 20 points I ever spent, he chuckled to himself, feeling that deep, soul-level satisfaction that came from effortless, absolute control. The face slap wasn't for Maya. It was for the universe. It was a statement. The rules that governed everyone else's miserable existence did not apply to him. Meanwhile, a few blocks away, Maya's former commander, a beefy man named Deckard with a smug face, slapped his new second-in-command on the back. See? Told you it would work. She was always too uptight anyway. A perfect distraction. They were holed up in a sporting goods store, cracking open warm energy drinks and feasting on stale protein bars like kings. They were celebrating their survival, completely oblivious to the fact that their lives had been spared only because a higher power had deemed their target worthy of saving. They were fools, celebrating their own pathetic cunning while the real player had just rearranged the entire board. Liam followed Maya's heat signature from the rooftops. He was in no hurry. He watched her limp into the grand, imposing structure of the city's central public library. A good choice. Lots of hiding places, defensible, and generally ignored by survivors who were only looking for food or medicine. He slipped down from his perch, his movements utterly silent. The library's main doors were shattered, and he stepped through the broken glass without a sound. Inside, the place was a tomb. Books lay scattered everywhere, monuments to a world that no longer had time to read. The air was thick with the smell of old paper and dust. His tactical lenses painted Maya as a warm orange blob in the deep shadows of the nonfiction section. She had pulled out a makeshift first aid kit and was trying to clean the gash on her leg, her movements shaky from pain and exhaustion. Liam moved through the towering shelves of books like a predator. He stopped about 10 feet behind her, a silent shadow among other shadows. She was so focused on her wound, so drained from her ordeal, that she didn't even notice him. She didn't feel his presence until he spoke, his voice calm and clear in the oppressive silence of the library. "Not bad skills," he said, making her jump so violently she almost screamed. "But you're not going to last much longer with a wound like that." The sudden sound of his voice in the dead silence of the library was like a gunshot. Maya, whose real name was stitched onto her tattered fatigues as Maya Reed, flinched so hard she yelped, a strangled gasp of pure shock. In a split second, instinct overrode pain and exhaustion. Her body, a finely honed weapon, twisted around. The combat knife, slick with zombie gore, was up and in a defensive grip before her mind even caught up. Her eyes, wide and filled with a cornered animal's fury, locked onto him. Liam didn't move. He just stood there, 10 feet away, a shadow among shadows, hands casually in the pockets of his corrosion-proof jacket. He wasn't threatened. He wasn't even tense. Inside his 15-meter awareness field, he could feel the chaotic storm raging within her. The sharp spike of adrenaline, the thrum of raw terror, the deep, aching throb of pain from her leg, and beneath it all, that white-hot core of incandescent rage at her betrayal. It was a beautiful, chaotic mess. "Easy there, killer," Liam said, his voice level. It wasn't a soothing tone, it was the voice of a man stating a fact. The voice of a man who held all the cards. "If I wanted you dead, you'd be a puddle on the floor already. The acid rain is getting worse, by the way. Probably melt you before the zombies could chew through your boots." Maya's breath came in ragged pants. Her brain was screaming at her. Threat, unknown, hostile, but her training was also screaming something else. No aggressive posture, no weapon drawn, deliberately revealed his position. This isn't an attack. Her eyes darted around, looking for his allies, for the trap. She saw nothing but endless, dusty shelves of forgotten knowledge. "Who are you?" she rasped, her voice rough with disuse and dehydration. Liam, a small, almost goofy smile playing on his lips. "Me? I'm a talent scout. And you, Maya Reed, former Delta Force operative, betrayed by your own commander. A man named Deckard. You've got talent." Her blood ran cold. The knife in her hand trembled slightly. How did he know that? How did he know her name? Her unit? Deckard? It was impossible. His face was unfamiliar. His gear was unlike anything she'd ever seen. It was civilian, yet it looked more advanced than their own military-issue equipment. "I don't know what you're talking about," she lied, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. Liam's awareness field tingled. The lie was so blatant, so flimsy, it was almost cute. "Sure you don't," he chuckled. "Look, let's cut the crap. We're in the middle of a global catastrophe, I'm getting bored, and you're bleeding out on the floor of a library. Your leg is shot, that gash is deep, and the gunk on that zombie's claws you fought earlier? It's not exactly sterile. In about, 6 hours, you'll have a fever. In 12, you'll be delirious. In 24, you'll either be dead or you'll be one of them. Your little first aid kit with its expired antiseptic wipes and a single roll of gauze isn't going to cut it." Every word was a hammer blow, shattering her desperate attempts to maintain composure. He was right. She knew he was right. She could feel the fire starting to creep up from the wound already. "What do you want?" she finally asked, her voice barely a whisper. All the fight seemed to drain out of her, replaced by a bleak, hollow exhaustion. Ah, the magic question. The start of every beautiful business relationship, Liam said, his smile widening. He didn't walk closer. Instead, he just stared at the empty space on a dusty library table between them. He accessed the Omniverse Mart in his mind, his thoughts flowing with the speed of light. Support tab, medical, surgical, automated nano-surgical field kit. Cleans, debrides, sutures, and cauterizes wounds on a cellular level. Requires no user input. Single use. Cost, 45 order contribution points. Class E tissue regeneration serum. Stimulates rapid cell regrowth for moderate injuries. Halts infection. Cost, 30 order contribution points. Total, 75 points. A bit pricey, but a good investment if she's as good as she looks. Purchase. For a terrifying, surreal moment, the air above the table shimmered, distorting like a heat haze. Two tiny, silent quantum thrower drones flickered into existence for less than a second. When they vanished, two items sat on the table. One was a sleek, white case the size of a paperback book. The other was a futuristic-looking injector, filled with a faintly glowing blue liquid. Maya stared, her jaw slack with disbelief. She didn't see the drones. To her, the objects had simply materialized out of thin air. It was magic. It was godlike. It was utterly impossible. Here's the deal, Liam began, his tone shifting from casual amusement to cold, hard business. It was the voice he used to use when closing a hostile takeover. I save you. I fix your leg, right here, right now. I provide you with food, water, and shelter that you can't even dream of. In exchange, you belong to me. Your skills, your training, your loyalty. Everything. When I give an order, you follow it without question. You become my right hand, my weapon, my shield. It's a simple, clean transaction. Your life for your service. He leaned against a bookshelf. Agree, and that medical kit is yours. You'll be walking in an hour. Refuse, and I walk out that door. You can try your luck with the fever and the infected hordes. Your choice. Betrayal had taught Maya a bitter, painful lesson. Oaths, camaraderie, promises of fighting for the greater good. They were all meaningless words that selfish cowards used to justify sacrificing others. Deckard had preached about the hard choices and the needs of the many right before leading a horde to her to save his own skin. But this was different. This was a contract, a cold, ruthless, but honest exchange. There was no pretense of morality or higher purpose. It was pure, unadulterated self-interest on both sides. And in this broken, rotten world, that was the only thing she felt she could trust. She looked at her mangled leg, then at the impossible, futuristic technology sitting on the table, and finally at the man who stood calmly in the shadows, radiating an aura of absolute power and control. She let the combat knife clatter to the floor. I agree, she said, her voice firm for the first time. It was the sound of a woman shedding her past and signing her future away. Excellent, Liam said, a flicker of genuine satisfaction in his eyes. Glad we could come to an accord. He then did something even stranger. He pulled out a slim, black tablet that hummed silently to life in his hand. The screen glowed, displaying a crystal-clear, high-definition video feed. It was an aerial view, looking down on a sporting goods store a few blocks away. You might be wondering what became of your old team, Liam said conversationally. The ones whose lives your sacrifice was supposed to save. Maya's eyes locked onto the screen. She saw them, Deckard and the other three men, holed up inside, laughing. They had broken into the store's stockroom and were guzzling warm energy drinks, passing around stale protein bars like it was a victory feast. Deckard had his arm around another soldier, boasting, his face smug and triumphant. The sight sent a fresh wave of cold fury through her. My sacrifice bought them a chance, she said, the words tasting like poison. A last, desperate defense of a belief she no longer held. Did it? Liam asked softly. He tapped the screen, and the camera feed from the tiny, invisible drone zoomed out. It bought them about 15 minutes, to be precise. The wider view was horrifying. The sonic lure had worn off, and the original horde, plus others drawn by the commotion, had circled back. But they weren't alone. Mixed in with the shambling F-class zombies were new horrors. Taller, leaner creatures with elongated limbs that ended inside like bone blades. They moved with a loping, unnatural speed, their heads twitching as they scanned for prey. They were lopers, one of the first nasty evolutionary steps up from the basic walker. On the tablet screen, the lopers reached the sporting goods store first. The plate glass windows, which the men hadn't even bothered to barricade, shattered inwards. The feasting turned to screams of terror. Deckard, the brave commander, shoved his subordinate towards the first loper that bounded inside and tried to run for the back door. He didn't make it 2 steps before another one dropped down from the ceiling, its bone scythes shearing through his torso in a single, silent, sickening motion. The entire slaughter took less than 30 seconds. It wasn't a battle, it was an extermination. The last thing the drone's camera focused on was Deckard's severed head, his smug expression frozen in a mask of final, idiotic surprise. Liam switched the tablet off. The library was silent again, save for the sound of Maya's ragged breathing. Completely meaningless, Liam stated, his voice devoid of any emotion. They were dead the moment they betrayed you. They just didn't know it yet. You, on the other hand, made the right choice. Now, let's get you fixed up. You've got work to do. The words cut deeper than any knife, surgically removing the last vestiges of her old life, her old loyalties. She felt no grief for them. Only a cold, empty clarity. She crawled to the table, her hands shaking as she touched the nanosurgical kit. The moment her fingers made contact, the case hissed open, and a cloud of microscopic, glittering motes swarmed out, enveloping her injured leg in a soft, blue glow. She felt a strange, tingling coolness spread through the wound, replacing the burning pain. She could feel the nanites working, cleaning, cutting away dead tissue with impossible precision, knitting muscle fibers and skin back together. It was the most violating and miraculous sensation she had ever experienced. While the nanites worked, Liam browsed the app again. He bought her a bottle of purified, energy-infused water and a high-protein nutrient paste that tasted vaguely of chicken soup. She consumed them gratefully, feeling strength return to her weary body almost instantly. Within the hour, the blue glow faded. The nano kit, its job done, fell to the floor as a pinch of inert gray dust. Maya slowly, cautiously, stood up. There was no pain. She looked down at her thigh. Where a mangled, bleeding gash had been, there was now only smooth, unblemished skin, not even a scar. She took a step, then another. She was completely healed. It was in that moment, as the reality of her new situation washed over her, the miraculous healing, the death of her betrayers, the terrifying power of the man standing before her, that something inside her snapped into place. A new potential, unlocked by the extreme stress and the influx of pure energy from the water. A puddle of yellow acid rain had seeped in through a crack in the ceiling nearby. As she stared at it, a wave of cold radiated from her. Her hand, held loosely at her side, became sheathed in a thin layer of frost. The puddle on the floor hissed and froze solid in an instant, the yellow liquid trapped in a block of cracked, unnaturally cold ice. She stared at her hand, then at Liam, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear, awe, and for the first time, a glimmer of profound, unwavering reverence. Liam just nodded, as if this was completely expected. Cryokinesis. Nice. It's a good start. He had seen a note on the app's universal newsfeed from a holdout of European scientists suggesting the alien dust could react with human consciousness under extreme duress, unlocking latent psionic abilities. Seemed they were right. He tossed her a bundle he'd just purchased. It was a brand new, form-fitting tactical suit, black and gray, far superior to her old torn fatigues. Put this on. My apartment is secure for now, but it's too small for 2 people, and it's not a real fortress. He turned on his tablet again, this time displaying a holographic 3D map of the entire city and the surrounding mountains. He zoomed in on a peak overlooking the urban sprawl. At the very top was a single, isolated complex. Our first real objective is here, he said, tapping the image of a large, defunct astronomical observatory. High ground, 360-degree view, reinforced structure built to withstand storms, and a deep underground data bunker from the Cold War. It's defensible, isolated, and a perfect place to start building. He looked at her, his eyes sharp and calculating, but with a flicker of something new in them. The pride of an investor who had just acquired a priceless new asset. Welcome to the team, Maya. We're going to have a lot of fun. 21 days. That's how long it had been since the world decided to collectively throw itself into a blender. 3 weeks. For the lucky few hiding in their basements, it was a terrifying eternity of listening to the screams in the rain. For Liam, it was more like an extended, high-stakes business acquisition. His penthouse apartment, once a symbol of sterile success, was now just a temporary launchpad. The city below had devolved from panicked chaos into a festering wound. The initial wave of mindless, shambling zombies, the F-class walkers, was still the most common threat, but they were now just the background noise. Organized groups, not of survivors, but of predators, had carved out little fiefdoms in the concrete jungle. They were far more dangerous than the zombies because they could think. Sort of. And then there were the new things. Liam had mentally tagged them armoreds. They were F-class zombies that had somehow developed thick, bony plates over their torsos and skulls. A 9mm round, the standard for most desperate survivors, would just plink off them like a pebble. You needed serious firepower or a precise, well-placed shot to the joints to take one down. The city was actively evolving to kill you better. From his floor-to-ceiling windows, Liam watched Maya work. She was a thing of beauty in motion. Clad in the new form-fitting tactical suit he'd bought her, she moved with an unnerving silence and economy of motion. Every step was deliberate, every glance a threat assessment. She was currently testing the limits of her new cryokinesis, freezing and shattering small pieces of debris he tossed for her. She was a quick study, obedient, efficient, and fiercely loyal. A perfect asset. Time to go, Liam said, not taking his eyes off the holographic map projected from his tablet. This place has served its purpose. It's time to upgrade our real estate. Maya nodded, not a single word of question. A faint mist of cold air dissipated from around her hands. That was another thing he liked about her. No pointless questions. He gave an order, she understood its necessity, and she prepared to execute. Just then, a strange, gusting wind rattled the reinforced windows. It carried a fine, shimmering dust that caught the weak light. "What is that?" Maya asked, her hand instinctively going to the hilt of her combat knife. "The latest party favor from the cosmos," Liam said, his tone casual. "High concentration elemental dust. The science nerds on the app forums are calling it hallucination wind. Breathe enough of it in, and you start seeing your worst nightmares crawl out of the walls." As he spoke, he felt the gust of wind press against the invisible bubble of his awareness field. It was like a soft, psychic static, trying to worm its way into his mind. But the field held firm, a perfect sphere of mental clarity around him. He felt nothing. He glanced at Maya, who was standing less than 10 feet away, well within his protective radius. She was also completely unaffected. "Huh. So it has a passive defense mode. Good to know. We need a vehicle," he stated. Moving a couple of miles on foot, even for someone like Maya, was suicide. "And I've been saving my points for a special occasion." He sat down on a packing crate, closed his eyes, and dived into the Omniverse Mart. He had been a busy boy over the last 2 weeks, using a small, silent drone to scout and pick off isolated armoreds and other minor threats, farming order contribution points. He had accumulated a little over 2,000, a respectable starting sum. He didn't browse the consumer vehicle section. He went straight to specialized equipment, all-terrain, armored deployment. The listings were a wet dream for any doomsday prepper. But one item, currently on a new user welcome discount, stood out. Wanderer 01 all-terrain armored vehicle. Propulsion. Silent, high-torque electric motors, 6x6 wheel drive. Armor. Multi-layered composite plating. Resistant to small arms fire, acid rain, and moderate physical impact. EMP shielded. Features: integrated air and water purification system, large modular cargo bay, basic sensor suite. Cost: 1850 order contribution points. Sold, Liam thought, tapping the purchase button without a second's hesitation. He still had a few hundred points left for emergencies. "Where do you want the delivery?" the app prompted in his mind. He pictured the secure, multi-level underground parking garage of his building, in an empty, oversized spot in the corner. "Here. Confirmed. Your Quantum Throa delivery is on its way. Please remember to rate your shipper 5 stars for a chance to win a complimentary prize." "Maya, let's go. Our ride is here." They took the service elevator down. The garage was dark, damp, and smelled of decay. But in the far corner, a monster was waiting. The Wanderer 01 was massive, bigger than a Humvee, painted in a non-reflective matte black. Its 6 huge tires looked like they could crawl over a mountain. It was silent, imposing, a shark resting in the dark. Maya let out a low whistle. "Holy, right?" Liam grinned. "Let's load up." The next hour was a flurry of activity. The hoard he'd painstakingly collected in a suburban storage unit before the end, crates of MREs, water, medical supplies, was now laughably obsolete. He'd already transferred the really valuable stuff, but he made a show of loading a few boxes into the Wanderer's cavernous hold before simply dematerializing the rest with the app's disposal function for a few points. Why haul junk when you can order a 5-course meal delivered to your dashboard? With everything set, Maya took the driver's seat. The cockpit was a mix of rugged, physical controls and advanced holographic displays. Her hands, trained on military hardware, moved over the controls with an innate familiarity. Liam sat in the commander's seat next to her, his tablet synced with the vehicle's sensor suite, giving him a 360-degree view of the outside world. "All right, take us out. And try not to scratch the paint." The Wanderer 01 pulled out of the garage with nothing more than a soft electric hum. It was terrifyingly quiet. On the streets, it moved like a ghost. It easily pushed aside burned-out cars and crushed stray, shambling zombies under its tires with a series of wet, sickening crunches that they barely felt inside the cabin. Liam's awareness field was spread out, a 500-meter radius dome of pure perception. He was the ultimate navigator, feeling out threats long before they became visible. Left here, avoid the collapsed overpass. There's a pack of lopers nesting in the rubble. Now right, through the alley. It's tight, but we'll fit. Maya drove with unerring precision, her knuckles white on the controls, but her face was a mask of concentration. They were a perfect team, his mind, her skill. The journey to the foothills of the mountain was tense but uneventful. The real challenge was the final stretch, a single, winding asphalt road that led up to the old observatory. The only way up, and that's when Liam's awareness field lit up like a Christmas tree. About a half-mile up the road, behind a blind curve. A roadblock, piled-up cars, sharpened logs, a crude barricade, and behind it, 12 men. Their minds were a chaotic slurry of greed, impatience, and a low, cruel sort of cunning. He could feel their anticipation, their bloodlust. He could even smell the faint, coppery tang of old blood on them, and the greasy scent of their unwashed bodies. On the grill of their beat-up pickup truck, he could sense a strange object, a small, filthy teddy bear, its eye gouged out. My kinda people, absolutely not. He felt the name of their little group bubble up from their collective consciousness. The Sawblades. How original. Their leader, a big lummox with a chainsaw resting on his lap, was mentally picturing what he'd do to the next woman they captured. Amateurs. Problem? Maya asked, sensing his sudden stillness. A welcoming committee, Liam said, a thin, cold smile on his face. 12 of them. Roadblock up ahead. They think this is the only way up. He pointed to the holographic map. See this old logging trail? It's overgrown, but the map says it loops around and reconnects with the main road about 200 yards behind their position. Maya's eyes lit up with understanding. We flank them. Exactly. Give them a little surprise. She turned the Wanderer off the road and into the trees. The vehicle was a beast. It snapped saplings like twigs and crawled over rocks and fallen logs with barely a whisper from its electric motors. The branches of ancient pines scraped against the composite armor, but left no marks. Meanwhile, at the roadblock, the leader of the Sawblades, a greasy man named Cutter, spat on the ground. Where the hell is everybody? I'm bored. One of his cronies shrugged. Maybe nobody else was dumb enough to come up the mountain. Someone will come, Cutter growled, patting his chainsaw. And when they do, we'll. He was cut off by a low hum. But it wasn't coming from down the road. It was coming from behind them. They all turned, their stupid, confused faces a picture of disbelief. The massive, black armored truck had emerged from the woods, blocking their only escape route. It just sat there, silent and menacing, its dark viewports staring at them like the eyes of some primordial predator. What the hell is that thing? One of them screeched. Before they could even raise their weapons, Liam's voice came through Maya's comms. Box them in. Maya's eyes flashed with cold light. She raised a hand, palm facing forward. The temperature inside the cabin dropped for a second. Outside, the air in front of the gang shimmered. The moisture condensed, then flash froze. A wall of solid, opaque ice, 10 feet high and 3 feet thick, erupted from the asphalt, completely blocking the road in front of them. It happened in less than 2 seconds. The Sawblades were trapped, an unbreakable truck behind them, an immovable wall of ice in front of them. The confident predators from a moment ago were now just rats in a vise. The driver's side window of the Wanderer 01 slid down with a silent hiss. Liam leaned out, resting his elbow casually on the frame. He looked at the panicking, screaming men, his expression one of utter boredom. Hey, he called out, his voice calm and clear. Thanks for clearing the road. Cutter, a creature of pure id, let out a furious roar and yanked the cord on his chainsaw. The engine sputtered to life. Kill them. Liam just sighed and pulled his head back inside. Floor it. Maya didn't hesitate. She slammed her foot down. The Wanderer 01 didn't roar, it surged. The massive vehicle shot forward. The sound of the screaming was brief, quickly replaced by the sickening, wet thuds and crunches of the truck's armored prow hitting flesh and bone, and the shriek of metal as it plowed through their pathetic barricade. It was over in an instant. The truck barely even shuddered. In the rearview camera, all that was left was a red smear on the asphalt and the shattered remains of a few cars and a useless chainsaw. The ice wall stood for a moment longer before collapsing into a pile of slush. Liam tapped his tablet. Oh, by the way, while we were driving, I ran a quick scan through the local news archives from the first week. Seems a family of 4 in a minivan went missing on this road a few days ago. The father was a park ranger. He zoomed in on a picture of the little girl, clutching the same teddy bear that had been on the gang's truck. Maya's hands tightened on the wheel, but she said nothing. The cold fury radiating from her was answer enough. They had just delivered a piece of beautiful, brutal, karmic justice. The rest of the drive was quiet. As they neared the summit, the world felt strangely peaceful. Liam took a moment to check the global feed on his app. A blip of news from a subaquatic research drone in the Pacific. A new island, roughly the size of Iceland, had risen from the seabed overnight near the Mariana Trench. It was emitting a strange energy field that was scrambling all electronics for hundreds of miles. Just another Tuesday in the apocalypse. He also checked a side mission tracker. A little blip in the city they'd just left. A high-tech mall. The app noted a unique psionic signature, techno-empathy. A young girl named Lily was holed up inside, a genius hacker who had turned the entire mall into a death trap of automated defenses. But the mission brief noted her power source was failing. A potential future recruit. He filed the information away for later. Finally, they rounded the last curve. There it was, the Griffith Mountain Observatory. It was an old, beautiful structure, a concrete and steel dome perched at the very peak of the world, overlooking the dead city below. Next to it was the entrance to the deep underground bunker, its blast doors closed. It looked pristine, secure, untouched. Too quiet. The Wanderer 01 rolled to a stop at the main gate. The air was still. No zombies shambled in the parking lot. No birds sang. Looks clear, Maya said, though there was a note of unease in her voice. Liam didn't answer. He had closed his eyes, his awareness field sweeping over the entire complex. On the surface, nothing. But underground, inside the main observatory dome, and packed into the deep bunker, he felt them. It wasn't like the chaotic, greedy thoughts of the Sawblades. It was a cold, vast, singular hunger. It wasn't 12 minds, or 50. It was hundreds. Hundreds of consciousnesses, all dormant, all hollow, all waiting. They were packed in there like sardines in a can, a silent, seething mass of potential energy, drawn to something inside. This wasn't a fortress. It was a nest. Liam opened his eyes, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across his face. Well, he said, turning to Maya. Looks like the previous tenants forgot to move out. Let's go serve their eviction notice. Liam's smile wasn't a friendly thing. It was the smile of a predator that had just found a perfectly stocked hunting ground. It was sharp, calculating, and held a chilling kind of joy. Maya, sitting in the driver's seat of the Wanderer 01, felt a shiver that had nothing to do with her powers. She knew that look. It was the look he got right before he did something terribly efficient. So, she said, her voice a low hum, matching the vehicle's engine. Not exactly empty, is it? Empty? No, not at all. It's full, Liam replied, his eyes still closed, his awareness field spread like a ghostly net over the entire mountain peak. He wasn't just seeing them, he could feel them. It wasn't like the chaotic, greedy minds of the Sawblades. This was a single, hollow hive mind, a psychic blank slate resonating with one basic command: feed. A static hum of pure, instinctual hunger, multiplied by hundreds. The previous tenants are having a house party. Looks like they invited every F-class walker within a 5-mile radius. They're packed into the main dome and the bunker entrance like commuters on a rush-hour subway train from hell. He opened his eyes, the dangerous smile morphing into something more akin to a project manager looking at a messy spreadsheet. The good news is, they're dormant. Drawn here by something, maybe a resonance from the old equipment, and just waiting. The bad news is, they're squatters. And I'm very particular about my real estate. Maya nodded, her grip on the steering wheel a familiar comfort. What's the plan? We're going to play a little game, Liam said, leaning back in his commander's chair and tapping on his tablet. I call it, fish and fry. You're the bait. He pointed to a large, open plaza in front of the main observatory dome, a flat, circular expanse of concrete perfect for stargazing parties in the old world. You're going to drive the Wanderer right into the middle of that plaza. Then you're going to lay on the horn and not let up. Get their attention. Get all of their attention. And then, Liam said, a glint in his eye, you're going to give them a cold shoulder. Literally, he pulled up the Omniverse Mart interface, his fingers flying across the holographic screen. He went straight to the military surplus section, a place filled with wonderfully destructive toys from 1,000 forgotten wars. He found what he was looking for under crowd control, area denial. Product, Vietnam-era gel napalm plus. Grade, tactical. Quantity, 5 drums. Special property, enhanced adhesion and thermal output. Cost, 75 order contribution points. A bargain. He hit purchase. 5 large, olive drab drums materialized silently in the Wanderer's modular cargo bay. Delivery received. Don't forget to rate your shipper. The app chimed cheerfully in his head. He ignored it for now. I'll handle the fry part, Liam said, hopping out of his seat. Just get them all in one place. And don't get boxed in. Understood. The Wanderer 01, which had been a silent ghost moments before, roared to life. Not its engine, but its horn. A deafening, continuous blast shattered the mountain's dead silence. Maya slammed the accelerator, the 6 massive tires squealing as the armored truck drifted into the center of the plaza. The effect was instantaneous. It was like kicking a hornet's nest the size of a building. The doors to the observatory and the bunker entrance burst open, and a tide of rotting flesh poured out. Hundreds of them. They moved with a lurching, unified purpose, their hollow moans drowned out by the truck's incessant alarm. A churning sea of undead, all eyes fixed on the black metal beast in the center of their world. Meanwhile, on a ridge overlooking the complex, Liam moved with quiet purpose. He effortlessly hefted the heavy napalm drums, his body far stronger than it had been a month ago, and placed them at strategic points along the low concrete wall that ringed the plaza. Down below, the first wave of zombies reached the Wanderer. They clawed uselessly at its composite armor, their nails breaking, their bodies piling up against the unmoving vehicle. The plaza was now a seething mass of bodies, a grotesque mosh pit of the damned. Now, Maya, Liam's voice came through her earpiece, calm and clear over the din. Maya's eyes, which had been scanning her sensor display, flashed with a brilliant, icy light. She killed the horn, and in the sudden, relative quiet, she raised her hand. The temperature inside the cabin plummeted. Outside, the world changed. The concrete plaza around the Wanderer screamed. The moisture in the air, the very breath of the moaning horde, flash froze. Geysers of frost erupted from the ground, racing outwards from the truck in a perfect circle. In less than 3 seconds, a massive wall of opaque, jagged ice, 15 feet high and several feet thick, shot up, enclosing the entire zombie-filled plaza. They were trapped, a coliseum of ice, with the Wanderer 01 as its sole, silent gladiator. The zombies, creatures of base instinct, didn't understand. They just slammed mindlessly against the new, cold barrier, their rotting fists thudding uselessly against the frozen wall. From his perch, Liam allowed himself a moment of appreciation. It was a beautiful, lethal piece of work. Show's over, folks, he muttered to himself, pulling a small, remote detonator from his pocket. He pressed the button. What happened next was not an explosion. It was a birth. 5 crimson blossoms of fire erupted from the drums he had placed. The gel napalm didn't just explode, it launched itself, arcing through the air in thick, fiery streams that splattered across the interior of the ice arena. For a single, breathtaking moment, there was a vortex of hellfire and flash-frozen steam. The extreme heat of the napalm met the absolute cold of the ice wall. The thermal shock was instantaneous and catastrophic. The zombies closest to the flames were incinerated, their moisture boiling away before they could even fall. Those further away were caught in the pressure wave, their frozen, brittle limbs shattering like glass. The ice wall itself began to crack and groan, Ju Da De Jung Chi Yun in a hissing roar as fire and frost fought a brief, violent war. It was over as quickly as it began. The fire died down, having consumed its fuel. The ice wall, fractured and weakened, collapsed inwards with the sound of 1,000 chandeliers shattering. In the center of the plaza, the Wanderer 01 sat untouched, its black armor now dusted with a fine layer of ash and frost. Around it, there was nothing. No bodies, no gore, no remains. Just blackened scorch marks on the concrete. The hundreds of zombies had been so utterly and completely annihilated by the thermal shock that they had simply ceased to exist. "Nice work," Liam said into his comms. Phase 1, complete. A few miles down the mountain slope, hidden in a small cave, a man named Jed dropped the pair of binoculars he was holding. His hands were shaking too hard to hold them steady. He and his small group of 4 other survivors had been starving for days, watching the observatory, too terrified of the sheer number of undead to even consider approaching. Did you see that?" a woman whispered next to him, her face pale with shock. Jed couldn't speak, he just nodded. They hadn't seen a fight. They had seen an extermination. They had watched a black truck and an ice wall and a sea of fire. It wasn't human. It was like watching a god get angry and simply erase a mistake from the face of the earth. He looked at the stale crackers in his hand, then back up at the silent, clean complex on the peak. The gap between their reality and the one they had just witnessed was too vast to comprehend. An hour later, the plaza had been cleared of the last few stragglers. The scene was set for the second phase of Liam's plan, renovation. "All right, time for some home improvements," he declared, pulling up the app again. His point balance was looking healthy, but it was about to take a hit. He navigated to base construction, high security components. Product, sentient memory alloy blast door. Grade, military. Features, self-repairing from kinetic damage up to 75%. Biometric and quantum encrypted locking mechanism. Cost, 750 OCP. Purchase, product, SR2, Stardust, microfusion reactor. Grade, A+. Features, provides stable, clean power equivalent to a small city block. Shielded against EMP and external tampering. Lifespan, 50 years. Cost, 1200 OCP. Purchase. This was the real prize. The key to everything. A quantum thrower drone, larger than the usual ones, shimmered into existence and deposited a massive, multi-ton blast door assembly right in front of the broken main gate. Another flicker of light, and a humming, glowing cylinder the size of a refrigerator appeared near the bunker's external power station. It took Maya's raw strength and Liam's new, advanced toolkit, bought for a paltry 15 points, to install everything. As the last bolt was tightened on the fusion reactor, Liam threw a heavy switch on the main control panel. For a month, their world had been dark and dying. But now, light returned. Floodlights flickered to life across the compound, bathing everything in clean, white light. Deep within the earth, the bunker hummed back to existence. Air filtration systems hissed, purging the stale air of the last 30 days and replacing it with the crisp, almost sterile scent of recycled oxygen. The lights came on in the underground levels, revealing a sprawling complex of server rooms, living quarters, a medical bay, and command centers, all untouched and waiting. The massive alloy door slid shut with a satisfying, pneumatic hiss, sealing them inside their new kingdom. For the first time since the world ended, they were truly, completely safe. As Liam stood in the main command center, watching diagnostic reports scroll across a wall-sized screen, he noticed something. The sky outside, visible on a high-definition monitor, was changing. The familiar golden light of dawn was wrong. It was tinged with a faint, but undeniable, sickly green. The green sun had arrived. The beginning of the extreme storms phase. The planet's flora was about to get a horrifying upgrade. Miles away, in a sealed, underground corporate bioresearch facility, a young woman named Ivy Thorne gave a final, desperate twist with a wrench. The security door's manual override groaned, then clicked open. She had been trapped for a month, surviving on nutrient paste and recycled water. Her lab locked down when the power grid failed. She stumbled out into the corridor, weak from exhaustion, and froze. The hallway wasn't empty. It was choked with thick, pulsating vines covered in razor-sharp thorns. They glowed with an eerie, phosphorescent light, the same sickly green as the new dawn. They weren't just growing, they were moving. A tendril whipped through the air, sniffing, hunting. It turned towards her. Back on the mountain, Liam and Maya were taking their first real, hot shower in a month. It was a luxury so profound it felt sinful. As Liam stepped out, a towel around his waist, an alarm suddenly blared through the entire complex. Not a fire alarm, but the brand new perimeter warning system he'd just activated. A shrill, electronic shriek. He ran to the command center, Maya right behind him, wrapped in a bathrobe, her hair still wet. On the main tactical display, a single green dot, a lone life sign, was racing towards their gate. It was moving fast, panicked. And behind it, a seething red mass of hostile biosignatures was closing in, moving far faster than any zombie. The sensors tagged them as aggressive flora. Someone was knocking on their brand new door, and they had brought the whole deadly, mutated garden with them. The air in the subterranean command center smelled of victory. It was a crisp, sterile scent, a cocktail of filtered oxygen and the faint, clean hum of the newly installed Stardust microfusion reactor. For 35 days, the world had stunk of decay and desperation. Now, in his own little slice of heaven, Liam could breathe air that cost more than a high-end luxury car in the old world. He considered it a bargain. He leaned back in the plush command chair, propping his feet up on a console that once monitored global data traffic and was now rerouted to display the status of his front door. On the main view screen, a high-definition feed showed the world outside. The sun had risen, but it was the wrong color. A nauseating, sickly green light washed over the mountain peak, making the familiar pines and rocks look alien and venomous. The green sun had arrived, right on schedule according to the Omniverse Mart's helpful little pop-up notifications about impending planetary phase shifts. Phase 2, Extreme Storms. Or as Liam preferred to call it, the planet's angry salad bar phase. Everything in the green, Maya said, her voice calm and even. She was standing before a bank of servers, a diagnostic tool in hand. Even in a simple pair of tactical pants and a tank top claimed from the bunker's forgotten storage, she moved with the deadly grace of the apex predator she was. Life support, power, water reclamation, it's all stable. This place was built to survive anything. Almost anything, Liam corrected, not taking his eyes off the screen. It wasn't built to survive a cosmic landlord who decided to redecorate with carnivorous plant life. In the last few days, the change had been terrifyingly rapid. The forests below their mountain fortress had become tangled, monstrous things. He'd seen a deer get snatched by what looked like a Venus flytrap the size of a minivan on one of his drone scouts. The zombies, once the primary boogeymen, were now just a C-list threat. The real horror was the grass that tried to trip you and the flowers that sprayed neurotoxin. Suddenly, the perimeter alarm he'd just installed let out a sharp, piercing shriek. It wasn't the deep, guttural tone for a large horde, but a high-pitched, frantic signal for a single, fast-moving contact. Well, speak of the devil, Liam muttered, sitting up straight. He zoomed the main camera in, following the blip. It was a person, a woman, stumbling and running with a kind of wild, blind panic that drained all energy. Her clothes were torn, her face smeared with dirt, but it was the look in her eyes that caught his attention. Pure, unadulterated terror. He pushed his awareness field out, a soft, invisible wave that washed over her. There was no deceit, no malice. Just a screaming will to live and a core of something else. A gentle, warm energy, like a flickering candle in a hurricane. Interesting. Hostiles? Maya asked, her hand instantly going to the custom cryo-glaive she'd holstered on her back, a gift from Liam. One friend, a whole lot of not friends, Liam replied, tapping another screen. He brought up a thermal view. The woman was a lone heat signature, but behind her, the undergrowth was alive with dozens of others. They were low to the ground, moving with the coordinated speed of a wolf pack. The system tagged them as aggressive flora, class 3. He could see their vague shapes now. Four-legged abominations made of writhing vines and thorns, with gaping maws that looked like mutated snapdragon flowers. Vine hounds. Cute. She's leading them right to us, Maya observed, her tone flat. A problem to be solved. She's not leading them, she's running from them, Liam corrected. And she's running here for a reason. Look. He switched the view to a wider angle. Their mountain peak was a sanctuary of clean, bare rock and concrete, an island of order. The rest of the world, as far as the eye could see, was a suffocating sea of monstrous green. She's running to the only place that doesn't look like it wants to eat her. He leaned back, a small, amused smile on his face. Bad for her, good for us. We're about to get a free product demonstration. Ivy Thorne felt like her lungs were full of broken glass. Every breath was a fresh agony. For days, she had been running, hiding, using the dregs of her knowledge as a biologist to identify which new, horrifying plant would kill her the fastest. She'd seen things that would shatter a sane mind. Trees that walked, fungi that created vivid, fatal hallucinations, and now, the hounds. She could hear them crashing through the mutated undergrowth behind her, their panting a wet, rasping sound of torn leaves and splintering wood. She had escaped her corporate lab only to find a world far worse than the lockdown. A budding, almost imperceptible connection to the life around her was the only thing that had kept her alive, a strange instinct that screamed at her when a patch of moss was venomous or a vine was a constrictor. It had screamed loudest when it pointed her towards the mountain, towards the barren, safe-looking peak. She burst out of the tree line and onto the open concrete plaza. Before her was a gate. Not just a gate, a monument of metal. A solid, seamless slab of dark alloy set into the rock, looking as immovable as the mountain itself. Hope, so fierce and bright it hurt, surged through her. "Help, please, someone," she screamed, her voice cracking. She stumbled forward, her legs finally giving out, and collapsed in a heap 20 feet from the door. The hounds broke through the trees behind her, a wave of thorny, leafy death. They didn't hesitate, their plant-like maws slobbering a viscous chlorophyll-laced drool as they bounded across the plaza towards her. Ivy squeezed her eyes shut, a single tear cutting a clean path through the grime on her cheek. This was it. SSSSHHHHHHH thunk. The sound was not what she expected. It was a precise, high-tech hiss, not a groan of old metal. Her eyes snapped open. The massive gate hadn't opened. Instead, a section just wide enough for a person had slid inwards with impossible speed. A hand, clad in a black tactical glove, shot out, gripped the collar of her tattered lab coat, and yanked her backwards with startling strength. Ivy flew through the air, landing in a graceless heap on a cold, smooth floor. The door hissed shut behind her with a deafening, final thunk. A wet, sickening crunch echoed from the other side, followed by a frantic scratching that scraped at her very soul. She lay there, gasping, her heart hammering against her ribs. The air was clean, the light was bright and white, not green. She pushed herself up, her body trembling. Before her stood a man and a woman. The woman, with eyes as cold and clear as a winter sky, was the one who had pulled her in. The man stood slightly behind her, hands in his pockets, looking down at her not with pity, but with the detached curiosity of a scientist examining a new specimen. He was handsome, but his eyes held a calm intensity that was more frightening than the monsters outside. "You brought trouble to my door," he said, his voice level, without a hint of emotion. "Now, show me you're worth more than the trouble you brought." The sheer audacity of the statement shocked Ivy out of her terror-induced stupor. She looked from his clean clothes to the spotless floor, to the perfectly lit corridor that stretched into the darkness. She had been saved, pulled from a literal hell into, what? The scratching on the door was getting more frantic. It sounded like a dozen giant cats trying to claw through solid steel. It was a sound that would have driven her mad with fear just moments ago. Now, she watched as the man, Liam, sighed. It was the sigh of a man mildly inconvenienced. "Damn it," he said, pulling a holographic tablet from thin air. "They're scratching the paint. I just got that door. 750 points for a custom finish, and now I've got organic graffiti all over it." He glanced at Maya. Unacceptable. He tapped on his tablet. "Let's see. Pest control. Active deterrent systems. Ah, here we go. Product. G2, Sunspot, close-range plasma turret. Grade. Automated defense. Features. Motion activated, IFF tag capable. Vaporizes organic targets up to 100 meters. Cost. 400 OCP each. A bit pricey, but you can't put a price on keeping the riffraff off your lawn, he mused to himself. He tapped twice. Purchase. 2 quantum throw-a drones shimmered into existence on either side of the exterior gate, their forms wavering like heat haze. They moved with silent, impossible precision, unfolding and assembling 2 sleek, gunmetal gray turrets onto prepared mounting points on the wall. The entire process took less than 15 seconds. On a monitor in the hallway, Ivy watched in stunned silence as the live feed showed the turrets activating. They swiveled silently, their optical sensors glowing a soft blue. Then, they turned red. There was no loud explosion. Only a series of high-pitched whines, like a flashbulb charging, followed by brilliant flashes of white-hot light. Streaks of pure energy, hotter than the surface of the sun, screamed across the plaza. The vine hounds, those unstoppable terrors of the new world, simply vanished. One moment they were a snarling, scratching pack of nightmares. The next, they were just expanding clouds of superheated steam and a light dusting of carbon on the concrete. The entire cleansing took 5 seconds. The turrets swiveled back to their standby position, their sensors returning to a gentle blue. The scratching stopped. Silence. Ivy stared, her mouth agape. The monsters that had hunted her for days, that had represented the absolute pinnacle of this world's new, violent food chain, had been erased. Erased like an inconvenient bug, with less effort than swatting a fly. There, Liam said, dismissing his tablet with a flick of his wrist. Problem solved. He looked back down at Ivy, his expression unchanged. Right, where were we? Ah, yes, your value. An hour later, showered and wearing a clean jumpsuit that felt like silk against her skin, Ivy sat in the command center, nursing a mug of hot coffee. Real coffee. The taste was so overwhelming, so nostalgic, it almost made her cry again. She had explained everything, her name, her background as a bioengineer studying the initial, elemental dust, her escape, the strange budding sense she had for plant life. Liam listened patiently, processing the information. A biologist with a flora affinity power. A perfect complement to the base. Her knowledge would be invaluable in analyzing the new ecosystem, and her power, once developed, could be the key to cultivating their own food supply in the underground hydroponics bay he was planning. It seemed his impromptu rescue had yielded a high-value asset. You're a lucky woman, Ivy, he said, tapping into the bunker's original shortwave radio systems. He cycled through the frequencies, the speaker crackling with static. Most people out there are currently fighting over the last can of expired beans. A voice cut through the static, weak and distorted but audible. Repeat, the Greenleaf tribe has secured the Grand Union supermarket. Any unaffiliated survivors stay clear. We have seen the gift. Eating the flesh of the new world makes you part of the new world. We are stronger, we are. The signal faded. Liam switched it off. The Greenleaf tribe, he scoffed. Sounds like a bunch of militant vegans. But they're not wrong. People are adapting. Some are devolving. New factions are rising from the compost. Your knowledge is a weapon, Ivy. To them, you're either a resource to be exploited or a threat to be eliminated. He stood up and walked to the main viewscreen, which now showed the pristine, empty plaza outside. Here, you're an asset. You contribute, you are protected. You get hot showers, good food, and you don't have to worry about being eaten by a psychotic cabbage. The terms are simple. Ivy looked at Maya, who stood silently observing, the very picture of loyalty. She understood. This wasn't a democracy, it was a kingdom, and she was standing before the king. A strange, pragmatic, and terrifyingly powerful king. After what she had endured, the choice was not a choice at all. I understand, she said, her voice firm for the first time. I'll be a good asset. A flicker of something resembling approval crossed Liam's face. Good. Beep 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 beep. The main alarm blared again, a new, more urgent tone. On the tactical map, a cluster of new signatures appeared at the base of the mountain. A convoy, 6 vehicles, moving steadily up the winding access road. They weren't being attacked by the plants. The aggressive flora signatures were actively moving away from them. Well, it's a popular day on the mountain, Liam said, his voice laced with a dangerous amusement. Looks like your old friends followed you. A new icon popped up on the display. Audio source detected. Liam patched it through the main speakers. A voice, amplified by a cheap loudspeaker, echoed across the mountain, distorted and full of arrogant menace. Ivy Thorne, we know you're in there. The director wants his property back. Come out now, and we might let your new friends live. The voice that boomed from the cheap loudspeaker was exactly the kind of voice Liam hated. It was greasy with unearned authority, the vocal equivalent of a cheap suit and too much cologne. Ivy Thorne, we know you're in there. The director wants his property back. Come out now, and we might let your new friends live. In the sterile quiet of the command center, the threat hung in the air for a moment before dissolving into absurdity. Liam glanced at Maya, who hadn't even flinched, her gaze fixed on the tactical display. Then he looked at Ivy. The poor woman looked like she'd seen a ghost. Her face, which had just regained some color after a hot shower, was now sheet white again. The coffee mug trembled in her hands. To her, this wasn't an absurdity, it was the boogeyman from her old life, back to drag her into the dark. The director? Liam asked, his voice casual, as if inquiring about the weather. Sounds important. Is he the one who signs your paychecks? Ivy flinched, shaking her head. He was the head of the research division. A cruel man. That voice, that's Quentin. Vice Mayor Quentin. He was the corporate liaison, the money man. Ah, a politician, Liam said, a slow, dangerous grin spreading across his face. That explains the big shot energy. Used to deal with guys like him all the time. All bluff, no substance. They think because they have a title, the world owes them something. He pushed his awareness field out, letting it wash over the convoy at the base of the mountain. It was like tasting spoiled milk. The dominant flavor was greed, a grasping, desperate avarice coming from the man with the megaphone. Underneath it was a layer of fear and blind obedience from his goons, and a bedrock of stupid, supreme confidence that their numbers and their official-sounding title made them invincible. Pathetic. On the main screen, the convoy was a collection of mismatched vehicles, a reinforced garbage truck, 2 pickup trucks with scrap metal welded on, and an ostentatious black SUV that was probably Quentin's personal ride. Men armed with a mix of hunting rifles and salvaged police gear milled about, trying to look tough under the sickly green sky. The mutated plants that had hounded Ivy seemed to be giving them a wide berth. Interesting. Probably some kind of sonic repellent. Low tech, but effective against dumb flora. Quentin, a portly man in a tactical vest stretched tight over a dress shirt, raised the megaphone again. People of the mountain installation. I am Vice Mayor Quentin, representing the new provisional government of the tri-state area. By the authority vested in me by the Emergency Survival Act, Ahem, Section 4, Paragraph C, I am ordering you to open your gates. All resources, supplies, and weapons are to be requisitioned for the common good. Comply, and you will be integrated into our community. Resist, and you will be classified as hostile hoarders and enemies of the people. Liam actually laughed. It was a short, sharp bark of a sound that made Ivy jump. Enemies of the people? Wow, this guy must have been a blast at WA meetings. He leaned into the microphone for the exterior comm system, his voice suddenly becoming smooth and clear, echoing across the mountain plaza with perfect fidelity. Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Mayor. Liam, the hostile hoarder, in charge here. That's a very impressive title you've got. To mark the establishment of your new government, please allow me to present you with a small welcoming gift. A fireworks show, if you will. He turned away from the mic, his grin turning feral. He looked at Maya, who gave a nearly imperceptible nod. He looked at Ivy, whose eyes were wide with a mixture of terror and a dawning, confused hope. He gave her a reassuring wink. Don't worry, the show's very short. He tapped a few commands onto his holographic tablet. The interface for the G2 Sunspot turrets glowed to life. He didn't need to aim. The IFF system had already tagged the convoy as hostile. He just needed to give permission to fire. He selected a target, not the SUV with the loudmouth politician. No, that was too simple. He selected the big garbage truck at the front, the one his thermal scans showed was packed to the brim with supplies. Clearly their mobile pantry, filled with stuff they'd requisitioned from other, less fortunate survivors. Target, he murmured, the piggy bank. He pressed the big red button on his screen that read, Engage. Outside, there was no warning. No screaming missile, no thunderous explosion. There was only a high-pitched, almost inaudible whine from the turret on the left side of the gate. For a fraction of a second, a ball of light, more brilliant than a welder's arc, formed at its muzzle. Then it fired. A silent, incandescent blue-white beam, no thicker than a man's arm, shot across the plaza. It moved with the speed of light itself. It wasn't an explosion, it was an act of deletion. The beam struck the garbage truck dead center. The vehicle, all 10 tons of reinforced steel and plundered goods, didn't blow up. It didn't crumple or catch fire. It simply vanished. One moment, it was there. The next, it was gone, replaced by an expanding cloud of superheated plasma and vaporized atoms. The ground where it once stood was now a perfectly circular, glowing red crater, molten glass and rock sizzling in the sudden silence. The shockwave of displaced air arrived a second later, a hot gust that knocked several of Quentin's men off their feet and sent trash scattering. The silence that followed was more profound and more terrifying than any scream. Every single person in Quentin's convoy was frozen, staring at the empty space where their largest vehicle and a huge portion of their supplies had just been. Their brains couldn't process it. It was a violation of physics, a magic trick from hell. The smoldering crater was the only evidence that it had happened at all. Quentin's face, visible on the high-definition zoom, was a thing of beauty. It had cycled through arrogance, confusion, shock, and had now landed on pure, gut-wrenching terror. The megaphone slipped from his nerveless fingers and clattered onto the concrete. His jaw worked, but no sound came out. His face was the color of old oatmeal. Liam leaned back into the comms microphone, his voice dripping with faux politeness. So, any more requisitions for the common good? That broke the spell. The silence shattered into a cacophony of panicked shouts. It wasn't an orderly retreat, it was a rout. Goons threw their weapons down, scrambling to get back into their trucks. The drivers of the pickups didn't wait, flooring the gas and peeling out, nearly running over their own men. Quentin, the self-proclaimed leader of the New World, stumbled backward, tripped over his own feet, and fell hard on his ample backside. He scrabbled backward like a crab before one of his bodyguards hauled him up and shoved him into the SUV. Tires squealed on concrete as the last of the convoy fled, a chaotic scramble of cowardice, leaving behind a few dropped rifles and a smoldering, perfectly round hole in the ground. Liam watched them go, a look of profound satisfaction on his face. He flicked the comms off. Well, that was fun. I was worried I'd have to get out the bigger toys. He glanced at the damage report on his tablet. Ah, the plasma splash scuffed the pavement. I'll have a quantum throw a buff that out later. He looked over at Ivy. She was staring at the screen, at the empty road where the monsters from her past had just evaporated. Her coffee mug sat forgotten on the console. The terror in her eyes was gone, replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated awe. She was looking at him not as a savior, but as some kind of minor deity. A god of brutal, efficient problem-solving. It was a good look on her. He walked over and picked up her mug, offering it back to her. Her hands were steady now. "Welcome to paradise, Ivy," he said, his voice back to its normal, calm tone. "The rules are simple. You contribute, you're safe. You get hot coffee, soft beds, and you don't have to listen to any more speeches from fat men in cheap vests. The world outside is a meat grinder. In here, we build." Ivy took a long, slow sip of the coffee, its warmth spreading through her. She looked at the spotless floor, at the calm, loyal killer that was Maya, and at the man who had just erased an armored truck with a flick of his finger because it was scratching his lawn. She had run from a corporate lab only to find herself in a fortress of impossible technology, lorded over by a pragmatic, terrifyingly powerful, and strangely charming king. The choice wasn't a choice at all. It was an ascension. "I understand," she said, her voice clear and firm. The last of her fear had been cauterized away by that plasma beam. "I will be a good asset." "Excellent," Liam said, the approval in his voice genuine. "Let's start now, then. Let's see that value you bring to the table. Tell me everything you know about the space dust that broke our planet." He gestured for her to take the command chair he had just vacated. It was a test and a gesture of trust all in one. Ivy nodded, a new sense of purpose filling her. She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was part of something new. She pulled out a rugged, heavily encrypted tablet, the only thing she had managed to salvage from the lab. With a few deft swipes, she bypassed the lock screen and pulled up a complex series of files. Molecular diagrams, spectral analyses, and lines of data scrolled across the screen. "I was part of the first response research team," she began, her tone shifting from survivor to scientist. "We called it elemental dust, a first, but that's not right. It's not a natural element. It's not random." She zoomed in on a rotating 3D model of a single dust particle. It looked less like a rock and more like a microscopic, intricate machine. The structure, it has markers of artificial construction. It's too uniform, too complex. It behaves less like a mineral and more like a programmable nanoagent. Liam leaned forward, his playful demeanor gone, replaced by sharp, focused intensity. He placed his hands on the back of her chair, his eyes locked on the screen. Maya moved closer as well, her cold gaze taking in the impossible data. Ivy took a deep breath, delivering the final, earth-shattering conclusion she had reached in the flaming ruins of her old life. "This dust isn't just altering our world, Liam," she said, her voice low and serious. "It's terraforming it. The zombies, the green sun, the mutated plants, they're not side effects. They are features. This is a product of intelligent design." She looked up at him, her eyes meeting his. "This whole apocalypse, I don't think it was an accident. I think someone, or something, sent it here on purpose.